Yeah, so just remember, I'll hand out the pamphlets. I've got pamphlets. We want to open up the Truth Seekers in Johannesburg, in Pretoria. And we're doing that. We're having our opening day on the 23rd of September. So you're more than welcome to come. Yeah, so today we're going to do spiritual life in the universe. And you're probably wondering what that's all about. But I'm going to start off and just show you natural evolution, how we have evolved over time as human beings, natural evolution from a theosophical point of view. And then I'm going to show you spiritual evolution. It actually follows the same course. It's amazing. As we evolve naturally, spiritually we also seem to have evolved in the same way. So this talk will give you a better understanding of religion, why people have such a strong need in their lives for religion. Why do we need religion, and why do we love religion so much, and spirituality? There's a natural desire within each one of us to worship something, to be in contact with the divine. There's something built in us that we are wired that way, to be theistic and to believe in something bigger than ourselves. But now let's start with normal evolution. If you think of where we come from, where did it all start? And it all started with water. We come from the water. And so we start with water. Everything has a consciousness. Everything in nature has a consciousness. Whether it be organic or inorganic, inanimate, everything has a consciousness. And water also has a consciousness. So in Hebrew, the word for water is tehom. Tehom. The primordial waters of creation. So in the beginning, the earth was without form, the Bible says, and void and darkness was upon the face of the deep. What is this deep? What is this water? Everywhere when you talk about creation, there's always this water aspect. In fact, also the throne room of God in the Bible, the throne room sits in the middle of the universe, and surrounding the throne room is water. It's a huge sea that is around God. So it's almost like some people believe in fluidic space, that out there in space is not really empty, that actually there is a liquid form out there, which is quite interesting, and we know nothing about that sort of stuff. So first there was water. Water has its own consciousness. We all come, every one of us, every living creature in the world, in the universe, comes from this primordial water. And so what is the next thing that happens? Well, crystals, earth comes. First you have water, then you have earth. And so we talk about crystals. And I mention crystals because crystals have a consciousness of their own. Maybe rudimentary, not as evolved as our consciousness, but it does have a primitive form of consciousness. It is aware. Water is aware. And crystals are aware. They are aware. There is a consciousness within. It's almost as if everything has got the signature of God in it. And they are aware. So before we were humans, we were crystals. Crystals come from the more common ores like rocks and stone. So first stone and then crystals. The consciousness in a crystal is the same consciousness that is in us, but to a greater degree. Man was made from the dust of the earth, the Bible says. So we come from the earth. We come from the soil. We come from the crystals. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. That's probably a Bible way of saying that inanimate objects have consciousness. Inanimate objects have the breath of life in it, put there by God. And man became a living soul. So the next one after that is organisms. Organisms begin to develop. But first we have single-celled organisms, amoebas. And the consciousness in crystals desire to experience more. There is this desire to grow, to be more aware. And so it needs a better body to express itself and to be more aware. And so it moves from the inorganic to the organic. And then after that, or let's read this, it evolves from the inanimate to the organic in the form of single-celled organisms. The next one is multi-celled organisms. Now we move to vegetation, which are much more complex carbon structures that are now biological molecular structures. The first multi-celled organisms began in plants. Vegetation begins to grow on Earth. The next one is we now move to creatures living in the sea. Before creatures lived on the land, they first lived in the sea. And so sea creatures are the first to be formed. Complex sea creatures. Aquatic life begins. And then for the first complex multi-celled organisms were in the water. Before our consciousness walked on land, we swam in the sea. In fact, there is a sort of a subconscious longing for water in all of us. We desire to be back in the water. Then the sea creature the fins change into legs, and the creature begins to walk on land on his four feet. Hey? Life now leaves the ocean and begins to walk on land. The fins on aquatic species now evolve into legs to walk on the land. So that's tetrapods. Tetrapods, that's a Greek word. Tetra is 4, the number 4, and pod is pos, which is feet. So it's 4 feet. Our consciousness is becoming more and more aware. We not only have a reptilian brain, but compassion for offspring happens in the mammalian brain. So mammals begin to walk and live on land. So now's the first time that we start to have mammals as well. We leave the reptilian brain behind and we go to the mammalian brain. So our brains are also evolving over time. Let's look at brain evolution here. So if you look at the brain consists of 3 areas. Hey? The yellow part there, the green part, and the blue part over there. So the yellow part evolved first, then the mammalian, the green part developed, and then after that, the blue part developed. So this primitive brain is called the reptilian brain, and that's where we get our flight and fight response, purely based on instinct. A very simple form of brain power. And then the next one with mammals, when mammals come, we see compassion and love for offspring. This is the mammal kingdom. Mothers looking after their children. Their emotion starts to develop now. Not just instinct, but emotion. That's the mammalian brain. Emotion and feeling begin to develop. And then we have the neocortex in highly evolved species. Neo is new, and cortex is to cover, Latin for to cover. It's the new covering, okay? And in the front, you've got the The prefrontal cortex is here in the front. And a psychiatrist was talking on the radio about teenagers. Teenagers, they say, have not, I don't know if you've got teenagers. I have got one now, I used to have two. And the prefrontal cortex hasn't developed in teenagers. Now, prefrontal cortex is things like very highly developed skills, abstract thought, and also not just caring for yourself, but starting to care for others. Have you noticed how selfish teenagers are? It's just me, okay. You can't blame them because their brains are not fully developed. So I told Michaela, don't worry, your brain is not fully developed. Your prefrontal cortex hasn't developed. Once that kicks in, 20, 21, 22 years of age, then you'll become an adult and you'll be more considerate of other people. So I just laughed at that. So the neocortex is now responsible for cognition, language, sensory perception, spatial reasoning, abstract thought. Higher forms of thought begin to develop with the neocortex. So we go further now. We leave the oceans, and the tetrapods now become bipedal. We begin to stand upright, and we have two eyes in the front, well-developed jaws and teeth. We become a predator species, hands that are able to pick up tools and start to develop. It's the hominid. The ape man becomes at this part of our evolution. Homo erectus begins to appear. So primates, hominids, and Neanderthal man is all part of this. And remember, it's all about consciousness. The same consciousness that was in the crystal is now in the hominid. And in fact, they say that the humanoid form with the head on the top, with the two eyes in the front, appendages with 5 fingers, is the most well-developed form in order to express oneself and to be part of the great consciousness. When you're on all fours, you can't really do much, all right? You can't do much with your hands. That's why our bodies evolved into a bipedal form. We can pick up a book now. We can read the book with our neocortex. So upright bipedal form with highly versatile upper appendages to hold and to use tools. We went to the Drakensberg once and we were climbing up. There's a ladder that you climb up. And on the cliff there were some baboons. And these baboons were picking up stones and throwing us at the bottom with stones. And I found this incredible. I never knew a monkey could actually do that they can actually use a tool like that. But it just shows you, the evolution that's happening. So we leave the hominid and we become primitive man. Homo sapien develops about 200,000 years ago. Homo sapien is wise man. Wise man. We become intelligent species. So most intelligent species in the universe on the 3D plane are carbon-based. We are carbon-based life forms and have this upright form with the one head and 2 eyes on the top. And then there's a further development that happens where we become even more advanced. And so the Homo sapien becomes Homo sapien sapien, which is an even more wise man. And that developed 50,000 years ago, the Homo sapien sapien, which is us, the modern man. With the evolution of the cerebral cortex, man now has the ability to perform higher brain function and activity. Creativity comes into play. Drawings, paintings on cave walls, tribal and corporate organization, political structures, governmental structures. Man can now begin to ponder religious and spiritual aspects, the contemplation of life after death, the elaborate burial rituals that we have. speculation of the origins of the universe. Is there a God? Man begins to ask himself, who am I? Where did I come from? Now, where are we going? If evolution has taken us this far, where are we going in the future? What are we going to become in the future? How will man look, say, 100,000 years from now? Say, 1,000,000 years from now? What will man look like? Well, there's a branch that happens. And we can either go one way, which is a way of destruction, or we can go a way of natural evolution. Technology is forced evolution, artificial evolution. Without technology, we speed the process up, but it's not the right way of doing things. So they talk about we can either become the super robot, we can become a super robot, or we can allow evolution to take its course and we become the angelic angel. We can become the angelic angel. Either the angelic angel or the super robot. That's the choice that lies in front of us. So in the future, man is going to become transhuman. He's going to become half man and half machine. And we're already beginning to see the start of that type of development. Hey, bionic man. You take your own eyes out, you put other eyes in, robot eyes, and you can see infrared now. Not just natural world, you can see infrared now. And so there's talk about that happening. Maybe they'll call the Homo sapien of the future Homo sapien futura in the future. Cybernetic systems capable of augmenting the human body. Now man begins to control himself and the environment. The biological is fused with the technological. Biomechatronic, or the bionic man. We now have that possibility in front of us. You can actually live forever as a machine. That's nice, eh? Leave your human body behind and live inside a machine. Wow, that sounds phenomenal. Maybe we want to do that. But that is taking evolution, that's forcing evolution before the natural process. We don't allow the natural process of evolution to take its course. Another development that could happen is if we become spacefaring beings, okay? And we live in space, or we live on ships for long periods of time, even generational ships. And what will happen to the human body if that happens? Well, you might grow taller because there's no gravity. Your appendages might get longer. So you'll be these elongated creatures. And you might not have a lot of sunlight. So pigmentation changes. You might become grayish in color. Right? And also with telepathic ability and telekinesis, the ability to lift objects with your mind, you might not need your appendages even more. So maybe your brain will get bigger and bigger and bigger. You'll have this massive head and just use your brain power to do everything. Okay, this is what scientists speculate. In fact, there's a guy named Dan Burash, who is a molecular biologist that was working on Area 51. And he was in contact with the grey aliens. And the greys told him telepathically, because he was in the clean room with them, he would take samples from their bodies. And the greys telepathically told him, they're actually human. That is, they don't come from space. They come from the future. And they've come back in time, 50,000 years, because they've lost their emotion and they've lost the ability to reproduce. And so they've time traveled back to try and rectify the situation. They should have gone transhuman. Maybe. So the Greys are saying that, no, this is what you're going to evolve into 50, 100,000 years from now. So that's something we can speculate. So you can go that way. You can go Homo alienus, all right? Homo alienus. Muscle usage, elongated bodies, and so on. You become these greys, the greys. But now, if we allow natural evolution to continue, what will happen to us? What will we evolve into? Well, in the future, we will simply leave our carbon physical bodies behind, and we'll become beings of pure energy, energy beings, beings of pure light.
Crystalline.
Crystalline.
It's called crystalline.
Oh, okay. Ascended light beings. This is where evolution will take us in the future. You see, the whole thing is we want to experience the world around us. The consciousness within wants to be aware, and so he eats and eats and eats. He desires more. I want to be more aware, and so the physical body becomes limited, and so he leaves the physical body behind to experience more of the universe, of source, of cosmic consciousness, and so he becomes a being of light. An energy being. Eventually we discard our physical bodies and become pure energy. Man will then become God-like. We are actually moving closer to becoming a god as we evolve naturally in the natural process. And remember, they say the universe is us and we are the universe. We become one. We become one with the universe. Man will become a being of pure light and energy. So this is perfectly and beautifully portrayed to us in the space movie Space Odyssey, 2001. This movie was made in 1968 by a man named Stanley Kubrick. In my opinion, it's the best movie that's ever been made in the world. Movies today don't even compare to the depths, the esoteric symbology that we find in 2001, A Space Odyssey. And we see this evolution taking place. Man starts off as the ape man. And one day these apes wake up and they find the monolith outside their cave. And all of them are curious and they begin to go up to it and they touch the monolith. In touching the monolith, an awakening happens inside the ape's mind. Now evolution is beginning to move forward. The ape man undergoes a paradigm shift, an awakening, when he comes into contact with the monolith that represents spiritual enlightenment. The monolith is a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment. And then it could be intervention of a sophisticated being that wants to move the human species forward. And so he comes into contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. And in the movie, he portrays it so beautifully. No words are said, it's just picture forms, telling a story with pictures. And for the first time, after he touches the monolith, he sees the bones lying on the ground, and he picks a bone up. And for the first time, he realizes the power of the tool. Technology happens. The evolution of technology. And the ape throws the bone into the air, and the bone becomes a spaceship in the sky. And so it's our technology that takes us from ape man to the modern man that can even leave the confines of our earthly atmosphere and travel the stars and become more enlightened as we travel the stars. And after this first scene, man is catapulted forward in his evolutionary process when man touches the source of cosmic consciousness. And the next scene, we find ourselves going to the moon. We go to the moon. And once again, we are confronted with the monolith. And modern man, the Homo sapien, now touches the monolith. And once again, he is propelled forward, even to a greater evolutionary state in the future. And so we move from the earth to the moon and eventually to Saturn and beyond. In the movie it's portrayed as Jupiter, but actually it's supposed to be Saturn. And this is also what we see on the Kabbalistic tree of life, the evolutionary process of going from lower dimension to higher dimensions. It starts with the kingdom at the bottom, which is earth. We then move to the second Seraphoth, which is the moon. We then move up to Saturn. And beyond that, we have Darth, the door to the other side, the door to the beyond, the door, the escape through which we escape the matrix world that we are in. So the ape man naturally evolves into the Homo sapien. Man's insatiable hunger for knowledge and his curious nature propels him forward to the stars in his quest for spiritual knowledge. And then we see Bowman, who represents the enlightened man, the Superman, going on a journey through space and time as all these visions flash past him. And then he goes even further. We naturally evolve from the ape man to the enlightened man, and ultimately to the Superman, and we then become God. We become God-like. In other words, the star child. That's what this big baby is all about, floating in space. It's the star child. The Superman enters nirvana, the place of ultimate bliss, a state of all knowingness. The Superman becomes the universe, and man evolves into a God. The star child represents man that has shaken off the shackles of his mortal coil, this physical body we're in, and has ascended all dimensions to become pure consciousness, pure energy, one with the universe. And that is nirvana, the state of bliss. So now, if we had to look at this evolution in space, if we just look at the universe around us, has what I've just told you now, has that only happened on Earth? Or has the same evolutionary process happened on other worlds out there in the universe? Have you ever thought just how massive and how big this universe is that we live in? Just our Milky Way, the galaxy alone, how massive it is. Our brains are just too small to really grasp it. There are 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone. 400 billion stars. That's a lot of stars. That's just one galaxy. Now, how many galaxies are there out there? And did you know there are some galaxies that are 3 times the size of the Milky Way galaxy? There are 200 billion galaxies in the universe that we know of, that we've counted with computers. In fact, some people say that the universe is infinite. There is no end to the universe. The universe is actually an infinite, eternal structure. And scientists now tell us, they now know that there's at least one planet to every star. Every star out there, no matter how, from a dwarf, a brown dwarf, to a red giant, to a yellow star, most stars have at least one planet revolving around it. And that's the big question. How many planets are out there, and how many planets have life? Astronomers tell us that 10% of planets fall into the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is the zone where the planet is not too close to the sun that all the water boils up, and the planet is not so far away from its star that it's frozen in space. But it's in the Goldilocks zone where water temperature is constant. H2O. H2O is the source of life. Water. We come from water. So, if this is true, if 10% of all planets are in the Goldilocks zone, then there are millions of habitable planets in the universe that can support intelligent life. So the statistics are telling us that we live in a universe filled with life, filled with all kinds of creatures, all busy with this evolutionary process, desiring consciousness, evolving to higher forms of intelligence happening in the universe. So if we just look at the Milky Way galaxy alone, this is what it looks like. Now, galaxies consist of a center point, and Steve Hawkins postulated, and they now know, that in the center of all galaxies there's a huge black hole that's busy swallowing planets and stars into it. And then from that center we have arms, these arms that go out from the center. Each galaxy, some have got 8 arms, some have got 10 arms, and they give these arms different names. And along those arms you will find planets or stars, and revolving around those stars will be planets. So this is just a speculative view, just to make you understand how the universe works and how we are evolving. This is Earth. Our soul sun is situated over there in the Milky Way galaxy. Notice it's not too close to the huge black hole, and it's not too far out to the outer edges of the galaxy. And this area, this middle area, is the space where life is most possible to exist. So galaxies themselves have Goldilocks zones where life is more prominent. So it's called, this green area where life is more often found, is called the galactic habitable zone. And we fall exactly in that area, the galactic habitable zone. So we have to also understand that evolution is happening at different stages all over the galaxy. Some have evolved and are now just ape men. Others have evolved to our Homo sapiens stage. Others have evolved beyond and are now energy beings. So everywhere in the universe you get these different stages of evolution. So for example, maybe in this area here, there's an M-class planet. M stands for planets that have life. Humanoid life can exist. There's an oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere, and people can actually live on that planet. So in that sector you'll find another one. Maybe over here, in this area here, we have an O-class planet, unable to support life like we know it. But maybe it's an aquatic planet, a planet completely covered in water, and the species there live in water, in liquid form. Here we have another Y-class planet, but the beings there have evolved beyond the physical and are now beings of light, energy beings. Here we have a D-class planet, Kepler, primitive humanoid. Here they're only beginning to evolve. Hominids are beginning to stand upright and leave the primates behind. And here's our planet, an M-class planet, Earth humanoid, and we are now on the post-information stage, post-information age. Just to give you an example of what's happening out there in the universe. Hey? So if that is natural evolution, then spiritual evolution follows the same course, follows the same development. And that's also very interesting. Where does religion start with primitive man? Religion is a natural anthropological development in man that began as a basic primitive form and became more complicated and evolved as time progressed. And so, like man evolved his physical body, so his spiritual beliefs also evolved over time. The cleverer we become, the more advanced our spirituality becomes. So the first instinct man had to be religious was an emotional instinct. Okay? Religion is not so much an intellectual thing as what it is a feeling thing. Emotion is tied to religion. Religion is tied to emotion. And the emotion that mostly grips man is the emotion of fear. Fear of the unknown. And so from fear develops worship. What we fear, we worship. Okay? So man created his primitive religion out of his fears of the unknown. The first instinct man had to be religious was an emotional instinct. Evolutionary religious development is not about thinking, it's about feeling. How do I feel about this great storm? Why is this big storm happening? Oh, the volcano. The volcano is erupting. Oh, the gods are angry. What must I do to stop the gods from being angry? That was our first understanding of religion. So to the primitive mind, there is little difference between fearing something, honoring something, and worshipping something. What you fear, you worship. You reverence. You venerate. So primitive man feared all manifestations of power out there, natural phenomena. He worshipped every natural phenomenon that he could not comprehend. Storms and floods and these sort of things. The powerful forces of nature are forms of worship. So the acts of nature are still called acts of God today. Insurance people say it's an act of God, okay? Because it's a natural disaster. So once we leave that primitive fear religion and we evolve, we now become people that worship nature. Animism. Animism is the worship of nature. And that begins to happen now. Spiritual worship of nature. And this begins later on. Nature religion has its roots in the primitive man's fear of the unknown. And so we begin to worship the things around us. So we see stones. Let's worship the stone. And so we erect stones and we begin to worship stones. We want to worship everything. We want to worship stones, plants, chemicals, everything we want to worship. Things we don't understand, we want to worship it. And so we make things out of stone and we worship it. Even in the Bible, we see Jacob, he puts his head on a stone. There's something happening there. And in the morning, he lifted the stone up to an upright position. The worship of stone, the worship of inanimate objects. They say that falling stars, shooting stars, was a flying stone that signaled the passage of a spirit on its way to earth. The Muslim faith is based on stone worship. Inside the Kaaba, on the side, I think on the eastern side, there is a big hole and you can touch a stone. The stone is a form of worship. That stone is an asteroid, a rock from the moon, they say, that landed on the earth long time ago. And they say the stone was white in the beginning and it became black over time because of our sins. When you touch the stone, that's why when you go around in an anti-clockwise direction, if you can touch that stone or kiss the stone, your sins are forgiven. Your sins are transferred into the stone and you become free of sin. Muslims worship the black moon rock. In the New Age movement, we see the veneration of crystals, stones. So the New Age movement venerates and worships stones and crystals. It's part of our evolutionary development. We also worship mountains, or the God in the mountain. God inhabits the mountains so that high elevations of land were worshipped for this additional reason. In fact, the word Sinai, Mount Sinai, is two words. It's Sin, the word Sin, which is the moon god. The moon god was called Sin, and I is mountain. So they called this the moon mountain, the mountain of sin, Sinai. Why did they do that? Because they saw in the Middle East that the moon went down into the mountain. So they said, well, that means that the moon lives in the mountain. The God lives in the mountain, in Sinai, Mount Sinai. So they believed the God was in the mountain. And that's where the Mount Zion comes from. Zion is the dwelling place or habitation of God. For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired for his dwelling place to live in the mountain. This is my resting place forever. God dwells in the mountain. Then we evolve even further, and now we begin to worship plants, especially South America, the American Indian, even Bushmen. They begin to worship plants. Not just plants, but the effects that plants give you. That trance effect, that state you go into, was considered a spiritual experience that they were having. And so man is intoxicated by these plants, and they see it as a spiritual thing. That's why alcohol today is called spirits, because it's tied to a spiritual experience. So it's the worship of plants. We then go to tree worship. Tree worship is very, very ancient. And the spirits that live in the trees can do good and can do harm to human beings. That's why we decorate the evergreen tree, which is Christmas. It's this whole idea of tree worship. Then when we finish worshiping the plants and the trees, we now turn to animals, and we begin to worship animals. So we worship the golden calf in the Bible. Man begins to worship animals. And that's a big thing as well, the worship of animals. Then we go and we worship the elements. Fire, air, earth, water. Elemental worship takes place as well. And, Madame Blavatsky actually talks about the elementals. The elementals, they are very powerful forces. And they can do things. They are like mischievous creatures, imps. Okay? And so you must be careful of the elementals as well. Then we want to worship water, one of the elements. Water baptism is a form of this type of worship. Even in Jewish mysticism and Kabbalism, they worship the 4 elements: earth, fire, air, and water. In India, elsewhere, the stars were regarded as the glorified departed souls of great men. So once we've finished worshipping all the stuff around us and stopped hugging trees, we now look to the stars. Let's start worshipping the stars. And so man now begins to worship the stars, celestial objects, planets in the sky as well. And so we have moon worship, we have sun worship. Muslims and Jews are very much tied into moon worship. Christianity is tied into sun worship. And so we begin to worship the stars. So once we finish worshipping stars, now we turn to ourselves and say, hey, we've worshipped everything else, let's start worshipping ourselves. And so man begins to worship himself. And so this is the age of kings. Kings are not only human beings. Kings see themselves as gods. This happened with Shaka Zulu. I was watching Shaka Zulu the other night. Not the new one, the old one. And Shaka believed he was a god. Not just a human being, he was a god. And they had this special oil and that the white man gave him. And when you put this oil on the grey hairs, it becomes black. And so Shaka thought that he's growing younger now because the grey hairs has gone away. So immortality comes into play. Man wants to live forever because man is a god. This is the era of kings. Kings were not just men, but they were gods. They forced their subjects to worship them. And even amongst royalties, kings actually see themselves as gods. That is why it's right for people to bow down to them and to worship them. Kings claim that they have descended from deity. Kings were the children of the gods. Now we turn to the worship of aliens or extraterrestrials. And we go through this whole thing of worshipping extraterrestrials as well. Some people believe that Jesus himself is an extraterrestrial that came down to earth, performing not magic or supernatural wonders, but just high tech. Him walking on the water was probably just high tech. But now it's a time for man to worship. In the olden days, we called it aliens today, but they called it gods, the gods of the past. And so these extraterrestrials came down and manipulated man, deceiving man and getting man to worship them. So Superman is a form of this alien creature that comes down to save the world. Okay, Superman comes to save the world, and people worship the extraterrestrial, masquerading as a god. So if we just do a synopsis of this spiritual evolution, we started with this aspect of emotion, of fear, of worshipping the wind, the storms, nature. Primitive religions was born out of the fear of the unknown. Then we turn to animism, and we begin to worship nature, the spirits within all things. Nature is then began to be worshipped. We worship the stones. Stone worship takes place. And we evolve even further. The elementals, we begin to worship the elements. And we went through that stage at the end of nature worship. Then we turned to the stars. We were fascinated with the stars. We began to worship the stars, the moon and the sun, and so on. Then there was the age of the kings, where man turns to himself, and the kings now begin to be worshipped and seen as gods. Then we turn to the aliens, the extraterrestrials, and we begin to worship extraterrestrials on our evolutionary path for spiritual development. And when talking about the gods, we first have polytheism. The kings were not just human beings, but they were gods. But then we also move beyond, and we think, well, there must be beings up in spiritual dimensions. And the first groups of gods were a pantheon of gods, a whole lot of gods together. Polytheistic religion, like Hinduism. Hey, the Greeks also had all their gods, a family of gods, a pantheon of gods. The Greeks and the Romans had this pantheon of gods. In fact, Judaism is also a polytheistic religion, because in the beginning the Phoenicians had all these gods, and then they said, no, we don't want to worship all these gods, we want to worship the main God. And so they chose one God out of that, and his name was Yahweh. And they said, we are now going to worship Yahweh, and we're going to put all the other gods aside. And so monotheism is born. So then preachers stand up and say, no, you mustn't worship all the gods. You must only worship one God, because only one God is right. And so monotheism is born in the three main religions of the world. In modern monotheistic religions, man has now turned to the invisible creator of all things, an intelligent being who looks like us, but who is the immortal God. Polytheism is older than monotheism. But as we evolve further, if we're going to become beings of energy, then we're also going to go through a process of apotheosis. Apotheosis is a big word which means becoming a god. We are becoming a god. Man's need to worship a god or gods will fall away, and man will become atheistic in his beliefs. He'll begin to realize there really is no need for religion. Religion will fall away as man becomes a god himself. Man will evolve to a point where he controls his own destiny. And I think that's the best definition of a god. The best definition of a god is one who controls his own destiny. And so man will ascend to higher planes of existence and leave the physical world behind. So I've mentioned here about salvation because religion is very much tied to salvation. Isn't that true? When I used to do street work in Pietermaritzburg, handing out tracts, and the tracts would say you need to be saved, and people would come and say, saved from what? Why must I be saved? What is this salvation all about? Salvation is very much tied to monotheistic faiths. The idea that man needs a savior. We need a savior, apparently. It implies that there is something wrong with us. There's something wrong with us, and we need someone to save us. So the question is man inherently evil? Or is man inherently good? Is there something missing in us that we need a savior? Sinners need salvation. The problem with salvation is that when God saves us, we become enslaved to that God. We need that God in our lives, isn't it? The God controls and manipulates us because we now owe our salvation to Him. Now, there's also not just an individual salvation, but also a corporate salvation. The world itself needs to be saved. We're messing this world up. And so we need a God to save the world as well, not just our individual lives. We need a salvation from above. But I think it's wrong to see ourselves like this. This is not a good picture for the human race. We shouldn't see ourselves like this. This is the biggest problem with religion. Religion makes us look like this. It puts guilt into us. And it tells us we are sinners and we need a Savior to save us. In order for the gods to exercise control over us, they will convince us that there is something wrong with us and that we need salvation. Once we concede to that lie, that is when that we are sinners, then the gods have power over us to manipulate us and to control us. The freedom we once had is removed and we become slaves of the gods. They will try to convince us that we are indeed sinful, weak, deprived, and in need of salvation. The gods will also try to convince us that our planet is in need of their salvation, not just us alone. Then it comes to the whole thing of scarcity and abundance. And the thing is, we must not live in scarcity. Scarcity is not a real state. Scarcity is a perception created by the powers that be. And so we don't need to live in a world of scarcity. Scarcity thinking is negative. Scarcity thinking is destroying. We need to live in a world of abundance. You choose to live in scarcity or you choose to live in abundance. Abundance thinking is positive and will become your reality. Okay? So even the Bible itself says that we are gods. We come from the dust, but we will ascend to the heavens. We are a work in progress. We're not finished. They haven't finished with us yet. Now, yes, we do need help, okay? We do need help from higher beings. We do need help from ascended masters. And little children, just like parents look after children, we also need to be looked after. And there are beings that look after us, okay? Just don't let them control you. But they want to help you. They want to guide you on your journey of evolutionary and spiritual development. But remember that your guide, the person that's looking after you, is a temporary thing. One day, at the end of the journey, there won't be guides around you. Towards the end of your journey, you walk that path alone, because you yourself will become fully dependent on yourself. You'll become interdependent and you won't need a God or guides to help you anymore as you grow and develop. Remember, everything that you need is already built inside you. The seed, the power that you have is already built inside you. It's just a matter of being developed now and grow like a seed that begins to grow. So, the need to worship. Why is it such a strong need for man to worship? In fact, the word abudah in Hebrew for worship is the exact same word for work, or to serve. So if you worship something or somebody, you are a servant to that person as well. And you show it by bowing down. When you bow down to a deity, you are giving your authority away. You are giving your autonomousness away to that God. Abudah means to worship, to work, and to be in service of the God. Okay, you work for the God. That's why Adam was a servant in the garden. He was a gardener. He worked, he tilled the land, he looked after the garden because he was a worker, the same word as worship in Hebrew. Many, if not all, the gods of the past could have been extraterrestrials, pretending to be God in order to deceive and manipulate people. Now, it's very addictive. This desire to be worshipped and to have power over others is a very, very addictive thing. And that's why these extraterrestrials want it so badly, for man to worship. Now, people bowing down to a god is subjugation. We relinquish our powers to the conquering tyrant. In the olden days, when two armies fought each other and the one army wins, the king walks amongst the people and the enemy has to bow down to that king. They have to surrender to the king. They're giving up their rights, giving up their authority to the new ruler that has arrived. Okay, the tilling of the ground, the working of the ground, working for the Anunnaki, making gold for the Anunnaki. This idea of service. Okay. Religion means control. Religion is all about control. The word religion means to bind, to control. But there's also a very good side to religion. Religion is not all bad. There's also a very good side to religion. But that old primitive belief of fear is still present in the churches today. Because churches tell you, you must be good. If you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. And so fear is used very much to control people. Religion has positive attributes as well, in the sense of spiritual discipline. And also, religious people are also very well developed socially. They have extreme powerful social skills. And religious people also live longer. If you want to live longer, go to church. Because that interaction with others is a very, very healthy thing. So it's not all bad, it's also good to go to church and be with others and everything. But you have to understand that a time will come when religion will come to an end. Religion will come to an end. Think of religion as the scaffold that is built around a house. Your body is like the house, the temple, and it's being built, it's being developed, it's evolving. But a time will come when you evolve beyond religion, when you don't need religion anymore. And then the scaffold is thrown away. You can actually throw the religion away. That's what Buddhism teaches. Buddhism teaches this letting go. It's all about letting go, not holding on. Have you heard people say, I need religion in my life because I want to hold on to something. I need something to hold on to. Yes, okay, that's fine. But a time will be reached when you don't have to hold on to that thing anymore. Then you've evolved beyond religion. The end of religion. Look at it this way. Religions of the world are like little boats on the ocean of the world. There's the charismatic church, hey? The AGS mense. There's the Roman Catholics. Okay? Here's the Presbyterians. Okay? Here's maybe the Theosophical Society. Here's the Hindu people. All religions are heading across the ocean to the other side. They're all on this journey. So it does serve a purpose. But eventually, when you get to the other side, you walk away from the boat. You don't need the boat anymore. Religion has served its purpose. And also, be careful of becoming too religious. And we'll end with this. There's a Chinese saying that says, legs on a snake. Legs on a snake. Have you ever heard that expression? Legs on a snake. Legs on a snake means it's just overdone. It's just too much. It's over the top. Okay? It's like you're going on a date with a girl and the guy puts so much perfume on, so much deodorant on, that you can't even get near to him because he smells. Where does smell come from? It's just too much, all right? That's legs on a snake. Legs on a snake. And religion is like that. A person that's over-religious is legs on a snake. Too much religion is like legs on a snake. So it's better to be religious on the inside and not on the outside. I think there's a saying, be a king, yes, but be a king on the inside and be a steward on the outside. To the world appear as a steward, but on the inside know that you are a king. But when you are in the presence of a very religious man, how do you feel? If the man comes up to you in church and he's wearing this holy hat and these holy garments, how does it make you feel? Okay? When one is in the presence of very religious people, one feels uneasy. It's like he shines a spotlight on you and reveals all the bad things in you. A religious man stinks. He stinks too much of religion. All right. So please, don't ride around with a fish on the back of your car. Please don't do that. Please don't walk into shopping malls with a Bible under your hand. That's legs on a snake. Legs on a snake. Your religion should be inside you. Your spirituality should be on the inside and not on the outside. Because religion will one day come to an end. Also, governments will come to an end. There will be no need for religion and there will be no need for government because man will become self-governing as he evolves into the future. And the Bible also teaches us in heaven, in the Bible heaven, there is no temple. There's no temple. In other words, there's no religion. There's no need to sound the church bells because there's no religion in heaven. So you won't have to ring the church bells. You don't have to hit the big gong, in order to start meditating because there's no bells in heaven, no temple in heaven, because religion is going to come to an end in the future. Okay, if we look at alien worship now, there's people that worship aliens, all right? It's a big thing. You must worship the aliens. So alien cults is not really about aliens. Alien cults is actually about the leaders, cult leaders. Cult leaders that need to soothe their ego. That's all about ego. And so these strange sub-religious groups begin to develop as man begins to worship aliens. And it's a big thing. What's actually happening is, with alien worship, they are playing, in all religions, they are playing on your natural desire to worship. Every one of us has a need for worship, okay? Science actually says there is the God gene. There's the God gene. The God gene hypothesis claims that humans have a genetic predisposition towards being religious. And so they play on this a genetic part of us. And so one extreme is this worship of aliens. Cults and cult leaders are simply manipulating this natural predisposition that humans have to worship in order to control their followers. People will worship anything. Give a human being a tree, a stone, an animal, a star, a human being. Give man anything, man will worship it. For some reason, we love worshiping. And here's the Heaven's Gates cult that came up, I think, in the 1990s. It was on the TV, it was all over the news, this mass suicide that took place. And the cult was called Heaven's Gates. These are Star Trekkies that have gone overboard with trekking, all right? It's legs on a snake. This is legs on a snake. Heaven's Gates was founded by, strangely enough, the son of a pastor, a Presbyterian pastor, Marshall Applewhite. And his partner was Ty. They changed their names from Doe to Ty. They were very musical people. So the group committed mass suicide in 1997. 39 members died after drinking poison. What is their reasoning? Why did they do that? Well, they believed that there was a comet coming. So this is the story of Marshall. This is the story of his partner. And so they committed suicide because they thought that if their bodies die, the spirit will leave the body and then go to live in the comet. They committed suicide in order to rendezvous with the spaceship. The only way to get to the spaceship is to kill yourself, apparently. It's like they're beaming up, traveling in the tail of Hale-Bopp comet. So when Hale-Bopp comet came in close to the earth, they all committed suicide so that their spirits can ascend into the comet. They saw their deaths as a graduation for the human evolutionary level. Once again, this is forcing evolution, okay? We don't allow evolution to run its natural course. We force it, we manipulate it through technology and through suicide to force an evolutionary progress. These guys were Star Trekkies. They had these badges on their clothes. The away team. This is from Star Trek. Away team is Star Trek. The away team. When they go down to the planet, they're part of the away team. Heaven's Gate away team. So now they're going away. They're going to the comet. The away mission. And so there's a whole write-up what they believe. They believe they were the two witnesses. Doe and Tyre were the two witnesses spoken of in Revelations. And this is the second coming, and it's the end of the world, and they have to kill themselves to go to Bob's comet. You also get the Church of Spock. This is also Trekkies that have gone overboard. The Church of Spock is a real church in America. It still exists today. And they worship Vulcan philosophy and religion and culture. That's the Church of Spock. Okay. There's the Church of Spock with the live long and prosper on the side there. The Church of Spock.
So Ian, they say that after Steiner especially says that after we've done Earth, because we started at Saturn and moved through all the planets, after Earth we go to the planet Vulcan.
Oh, the one at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that's probably when this is.
Vulcan, yeah. And Vulcan is very much tied to the ancient volcano religions of the Phoenicians. Vulcan philosophy is based on pure logic. A lifestyle devoid of emotion is emphasized. You want to be a Vulcan now. And so every Sunday, a holy mind meld. Remember Star Trek where they did the mind meld? Okay, so they do this holy mind meld. And some of the members go so far as to do plastic surgery, and they actually make their ears look like Spock. Okay. Don't you think people are weird? What is wrong with human beings? Human beings are weird people, eh? But it's a desire for worship. We want to worship. There's this insatiable desire in man. That's why the churches are full of people. And give their money to the churches, because we have a very strong desire to worship something. Some members have undergone plastic surgery. There's another group called the Aetherius Society, started by this man, Dr. George King. And what I found interesting about this religion, they got this apparatus. This is now a battery. It's a battery. And then you put spiritual energy into the battery. Okay? You put spiritual energy, that's what they're doing there. They're putting spiritual energy into the battery. And then it becomes, they store this energy in the battery, and then they direct it through a radiator to whoever needs all that energy. And then the energy goes out, and that person gets healed or whatever. So every day they fill the battery up, every meeting they have. Spiritual workers pray and chant mantra and focus the energy into the battery where it is stored in the battery. So all these different religions are out there. Alien spirituality. This is a very interesting gentleman, telepathic communication with extraterrestrials. This is what we spoke about yesterday with Elizabeth Clara and so on. He's written quite a few books, this gentleman. His name is Marshall Vine Summers, and it's all about exopolitics and exotheology, making contact with extraterrestrial species in the galaxy. So there's truth to this, but there's also, dangers to it as well. One of his books is called The Reality of Spirituality of Life in the Universe. Another book, this is a very good book, The Allies of Humanity. I've got these books if anybody wants to read them, but very, very good books. The greater community, the galactic community out there. And yes, one day I think, perhaps now only telepathically we are in contact with them, but a time will come when we will join our brothers, our universal galactic brothers in the stars, and also become spacefaring like they are spacefaring. So the New World Order, we're living in a time of the New World Order. Hey, the world we live in today is about to undergo a tremendous change. We're seeing that change happen before our very eyes. The talk of UFOs has become very big in the media now. People are becoming aware and are waking up to this UFO presence, that we are not alone in the universe. A lot of our movies are like this. We're also moving towards a cashless society, a digital economy. Cash as we know it is going to fall away, and we're going into a cashless society, which is tied to the social credit score. So everything you do will be judged, and you will be rewarded financially by the way you behave through AI, through artificial intelligence. Or punished, yeah. So if you don't do what the government tells you to do, then you won't get your pizza, because they'll lock your ability to hire a drone, because your food, you won't have cars anymore, because they don't want you to travel in the 15-minute cities. So you do the takeaway with Mr. Delivery, and then a drone brings you your pizza, okay, and drops it off at your house. But if you've been locked out of that privilege, you won't get your pizza, you see. So that's how they will control you. Once they take cash away, the government will have absolute control over everything that you do in life. It's the one world government of the future. That's where this world is heading towards. The one world economical structure. Bad things are coming up. Oh yeah, and it's weird because there are two thoughts in alternative thinking today. On the one hand, there's a group of alternative conspiracy theorists that believe that things are going very bad. The whole world's going to collapse, Get ready. Become a doomsday prepper. Dig a hole in your backyard. Put a whole lot of tins and food there because the end is coming. You get those. On the other hand, you get the Nasara and the Jasara crowd and the quantum financial system. And Mr. Trump is the big leader, and he's going to save the world. And the world's going to change, and it's going to become the golden age. And Trump's going to ride a white horse and save us all. So you get that understanding as well, that things are getting better. So I don't know how you feel about what's happening. But there's a lot of strange stuff going around. And in all that madness, we need to find truth. But it's very possible that we're going to experience some or other extraterrestrial being. A being's going to come from outer space, from another world, like Superman. And he's going to come with incredible powers. And he's going to solve the problems of the world. And he won't just be our world leader, he will be our spiritual leader. And the world will bow down to this one world leader. The Jews will see him as the Messiah. The Christians will see him as Jesus. The Muslims will see him as Muhammad, and so on. The Buddhists will see him as Muhammad, okay? Or the Muslims as Allah. So an extraterrestrial being of immense power with great supernatural abilities will become our new supreme world leader. as well as our spiritual leader. And the governments of the world will worship this leader. And so they paint this picture of the World Economic Forum, of the 15-minute cities, and how wonderful it's going to be. Don't believe it. It's a joke. So, yeah, just talk about the definition of a God, what nirvana is all about. There's a very strong parallel between nirvana and heaven. What Christ said and what Buddha said is almost the same. Christianity shares this idea of nirvana in the sense that Jesus has made it possible for humans to be raised to the Christ level and to share in the divine nature. So we're all on a path, we're all on a spiritual path, and as we walk this path, we are evolving. We're becoming God. We're becoming like a God as we evolve on this path. But towards the end of the path, it becomes more difficult because you won't have so much help at the end. You need to do it by yourself. You need to overcome your own obstacles by yourself. The ascended masters will stand back as you ascend. The true definition of a God is a person that has complete control over his own destiny. If you can honestly say that you have complete control over your own destiny, then you are a God. The problem with Christianity is that position is already taken. Okay, there's no vacancies. In Christianity, there's only one God. So you can't be God because God is God, you see. So we got a bit of a problem there. But Jesus himself said, become like me. Jesus says, become like me, just like I am like my Father.
But he also said, do you not know that you all are gods?
Yeah, in the Psalms, that you are gods. Yeah.
Do what I do and even better.
Yeah. So the temptation in the world, in the Garden of Eden, is to become like a God. What we actually desire as human beings is we want to be God-like. All our problems will be solved if we can become God-like. Because why? A God is free. A God is in control. A God is wealthy. A God is happy. A God is healthy, peaceful, lacking nothing, able to destroy his enemies, omniscient and omnipresent, and above all, eternal. This is what a God is. And that is nirvana. That's the state of nirvana. But, there's a big but here. We need to be prepared for it. Like Spider-Man in the comics says, hey, with great power comes great responsibility. So you need to be mature enough to handle that type of power, okay? And none of us is gereed with that, okay? We still need to mature and grow up. Can you imagine if Ramaphosa and Julius had that type of power? What would happen? Eh? Think.
You'll have to blow them up.
You won't be able to because they're gods, you see. So nirvana, this is the end, nirvana. We're going to, and you're going to see this in that beautiful movie that I'm going to show you in October, called The Fountain, with Hugh Jackman. You see this idea of ascension. One of the most beautiful scenes you'll ever see on the silver screen. The ascension. We ascend from this world and we become beings of pure energy, pure light. We go into the awe of the universe. And so it's not the end, it's only the beginning. Thanks, everybody.